Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to our regular City Council meeting. It's Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018. This is our City Council meeting located at the Veterans Memorial Hall for our viewing audience. Thank you. And I'm speaking into the microphone. If maybe AGP is there, can you turn that up a little bit? A little bit more? Okay, that good? That's better? Thank you. I'll get closer as well. Oh, whoa, good, thanks. Thanks for that, folks. So for the record, all council members are present. We do have a quorum, and we'll call the meeting to order. And with that, if you'll all join us in a moment of silence. Thank you. And Marlos, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I think we're gathering speaker slips, so we have speaker slips back on the table. So we'll have speaker slips for public comment for items not on the agenda. We have speaker slips for our consent agenda. We have one public hearing for an Embarcadero project, Gray's Inn. So we'll have public comment speaker slips for that, and we have 3 business items, items C, 1, 2, and 3, and we'll have separate speaker slips for those items as well. And if there's any items later on the agenda that folks can't stay for but would like to speak to during the regular public comment, if you could just note that on your speaker slip, that'd be helpful, and Dana will get those speaker slips. Thanks. We don't have any recognitions tonight. Closed session report, Mr. Pannoni.
We didn't have a closed session, so there's nothing to report.
Thank you, Joe. And Mayor, council members' reports and announcements. And I just want to start off. I had the privilege and honor to attend a recognition dinner for 2 of our very well-qualified, great police employees, Bonnie Johnson and Jeremy Painter. And I was just going to turn it over to our police chief to give a little bit of background about the presentation and recognize those 2 great employees. Chief?
Thank you so much, Mayor. We had the honor last week of honoring Officer Jeremy Painter, who is one of our fine officers. He has in the past been Officer of the Year, and he is a motor officer. He is a range master. He's one of our supervisors and a traffic expert. Jeremy has done outstanding work for us, and it was really an honor to recognize his great work. Secondly, we honored my boss, one of my bosses, Support Services Manager Bonnie Johnson. Bonnie wears a variety of hats in our police department. She, the list goes so far and so long, but suffice it to say that Bonnie is really the glue that holds the Morro Bay Police Department together and keeps us running behind the scenes. And so it was such an honor to have the mayor present to honor these officers, and we appreciate your support so much.
Great, Chief. Thanks very much, and we're grateful for those 2 employees and all of our public safety officers. With that, we'll go to announcements, and I'll look towards Matt. Do you want to start us off?
Yes, I'd like to acknowledge this past Saturday there was a tremendous event at the community center for a 55 plus health and wellness fair. There's over 100 attendees there, and so I'd really like to give a shout out and kudos to Brady Locke, who coordinated the event, and then Kirk Carmichael from Parks and Rec. It was a tremendous event for our seniors here in town, and being under 55, I was carded at the door. And And so I'm like, wow, that's the other side, huh? Also, I'd like to give a shout out to our Detective Mark Martin from Morro Bay Police Department. He was also there carrying over. He'd come to Morro Bay to council, and he'd presented a few months back on the various financial scams that are being perpetuated, namely upon our seniors in our community. And he was also at this fair, again, just bringing to light how these scams happen and giving out information and talking to people about it. So it was a wonderful follow-up. So, Chief, thank you very much for having him there. And it was tremendous to be there at this event. And that's all my announcements.
Thanks, Matt. Red?
Thank you. Morro Bay Friends of the Library is having a huge used book sale this coming Saturday at the Morro Bay Library on Harbor Street. It starts at 9 o'clock for members of the Friends of the Library. 10 o'clock it is open to the general public, and it will be open until 1 o'clock. There is a benefit offered if you are not a member of the Friends and you want to go in at 9 o'clock, show up and pay your dues, and you will be immediately accepted into the organization, allowed to go in and do some early shopping. Then next month, February 9th, on our overhead is an announcement for Art After Dark at the library. That will be February 9th from 5 to 7 p.m. You can meet incredible local artists, including Jeff Odell. I see Jeff's here tonight, and some of his art is up on the overhead. This is a free event with free refreshments. So that's how you draw people, free food. I will do office hours this coming Saturday, the 27th, at Sun and Buns from 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock, and then I will do a business walk after that. So that's all.
Thanks, Red. John?
Good evening, folks. I had the opportunity to walk in front of my home this past weekend, if my dates are correct. I'm trying to remember time. And ran into somebody that was here for the Bird Festival, and they were from out of town. And we just got to chatting, and they were just extolling the virtues of the community and the Bird Festival, and what a great place Morro Bay is, and a place to come, and what a well-organized festival that these people had enjoyed coming to a number of times. And so I just wanted to thank all of those that were involved in putting together that event and that continue to do that for the community. It's a great tourist attraction, but also a great opportunity for improving community health, because people get out, they're in nature, and they're breathing this wonderful clean air that we have and just enjoying themselves in Morro Bay. So thank all of the folks, including Councilperson McPherson, for her involvement over the years and currently in that as well. I'd be remiss to tell you that it's getting worse with regard to the flu, folks. In all seriousness, the peak has not hit yet. There are now in California over 75 deaths, and in San Luis Obispo County, more than 25 of those 75 or so deaths are in SLO County. So I just implore you to think about a flu immunization vaccine if you haven't gotten one. It will help significantly curtail and also decreases the intensity of the flu. And so I beg of you to consider that if you haven't had it. They're available throughout many places in the community. Talk to your doctor about it. But it hasn't peaked yet, which means it's going to get worse. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Councilperson McPherson.
And I just have to say thank you, John, for that, the announcement about the Bird Festival. And we were grateful that we had good weather, so we didn't have to cancel any trips. I don't have any announcements.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. City Manager's reports, anything?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Scott Collins, City Manager. I just had 4 things I wanted to bring to the attention of council and the community. Last council meeting, the City Council agreed to host a retreat, which will look at the goals and objectives for the calendar year 2018. That meeting will be held Friday, February 2nd from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. in the Auditorium East within the Community Center. Materials will be available online either this Friday or Monday. at the latest. We encourage community members to attend and provide input on that important process. Information about the retreat will be put on the website, Facebook, and we'll ask folks that are on Nextdoor to share that. We want a good turnout. City Council, the last council meeting, also directed the city manager to recruit for a program manager position for the wharf project. So been working hard on that. I wanted to say a word of thanks to the consolidated maintenance crew. I did a tour with them this Monday, and they're responsible for all city facilities, all parks, and most public restrooms are all public restrooms. And I was blown away by the amazing condition of all those facilities and parks. Just want to say thanks for all that they do. And then lastly, Highway 1 is reopened. It reopened late last week. Amazing effort by Caltrans and all the contractors that worked with them to clear a significant amount of mud and debris off of Highway 1 to reopen that. It's a major artery into our area, significant impacts on our tourism, and so we're very thankful that it's open again.
Okay, thanks, Scott. And
Scott,
I think
you said Highway 1. Did you mean 101?
Yeah.
101, not 1.
Yeah.
1 is still closed north
Yes,
of it.
Highway 101, down by Santa Barbara. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, Red. Thanks, Scott. And with that, we'll move on to our public comment period, and we open up our public comment with a business spot, and we tonight have with us Cindy Williams from Rustic Diamond. Cindy, if you'd come on up and introduce yourself and say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself and your business. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Cindy Williams. I have the Rustic Diamond on 1190 Main Street and Surf, so we're neighbors. I'm across from the Masterpiece Hotel. We are a collection of vendors that get to express our creative abilities, and we have a lot of one-of-a-kind items. We have whimsical art by a vendor out of Bakersfield. We have some very unique lighting and lamps by Neil, who is a local artist in Morro Bay. We have some fabulous stepping stones of mosaic that are out of Los Osos, a team out of Los Osos. 80% of our store is handmade items, so you're going to find some very unique things. We have clothing, one-of-a-kind jewelry, lots of very, very unique items. We are hours of operation. In the winter, we're a part-time store. We're open Thursday through Sunday, 10 to 5. But once it starts cooking over in the valley, we open full-time for the 7 days, 10 to 5. We'll be part of the citywide yard sale. That sort of kicked our business off last year after we had 3 months of rain. That was that brought in a lot of customers and people that recognized that we were a new store. So we're thrilled to be here in Morro Bay. The people here are just fabulous, friendly. I've made so many awesome new friends, and just have had and enjoyed having a business here. So please stop by and see us. If you mention that you're here, I'll give you a 10% discount.
All right.
And thank you very much.
Cindy, thank you, and welcome to Morro Bay.
Thank you.
Appreciate having you. And with that, we'll open up public comment. First up is Ken Green, followed by Ray McKelvey.
Mayor Irons, council members, staff. I'm Ken Green, a citizen of Morro Bay, representing Morro Bay Action Team. I'm also a member of CAL. My concern is with the water treatment facility, water reclamation facility, particularly with respect to the discrepancies between what you have approved by vote and the actions you are taking. There are two sets of discrepancy. One concerns the nature of the project, and the other concerns the site of the project. Regarding the nature of the project, the last vote you undertook on the nature of the project was on April 25th, 2017. In that vote, you passed motions that approved a water treatment facility, WTF, that would include level 3 or less. Nonetheless, most of your discussion and written material since then have addressed a water reclamation facility. This is inappropriate because you have not approved such a facility. In your meeting of September 26, 2017, you gave reasons for shifting focus to water reclamation. These reasons included a sense that CEQA, the Coastal Commission, and lending agencies required reclamation if they were to approve the project. In that meeting, you voted 5-0 on several motions directing staff to study different aspects of water reclamation facility, but you did not vote to make the project a water reclamation facility, nor have you voted to do so yet. Regarding the site of the project, you have entertained placing it at any of several possible locations around town. Indeed, at your meeting of July 11, 2017, you voted 5-0 on several motions to direct staff to explore costs for a plant near the current one, as well as at the Righetti site and the Giannini site. Later, after gathering further information during your meeting on September 26, 2017, you reviewed multiple factors concerning sites and came to a consensus that South Bay would be your preferred site. A consensus is not a vote. Nonetheless, since that time, you have behaved as if the plant will be at South Bay. And I must say that the addendum that Mr. Livick sent out today at the last minute really is out of line at this time. Until you take a vote, there is no official site for the project. So, to be constructive about this, it's really time for you to take a vote on both of these matters so that the citizens of Morro Bay know what the plans are. If you have reasons for not voting, then in the interests of transparency, you should give them.
Thanks, Ken. Ray McKelvey.
Ray McKelvey, resident of Morro Bay, representing the Lions Club tonight. I want to share some good news about a car donation program that is helping some in our community in need of safe and reliable transportation. This program is made possible by a coalition of a private business, Todd's Garage on Quintana, the Community Resource Connection, and the Morro Bay Lions Foundation. Bill Todd and his son Mike started the car giveaway program in 2014 with the business giving away 1 or 2 cars a year to a needy individual or family. The Community Resource Connection, under the leadership of Sharon O'Leary, began to select the recipients. In 2017, the Morro Bay Lions Club completed the establishment of a 501c3 nonprofit public benefit foundation recognized by the state and the IRS. This past year, the coalition of Todd's Garage, the Community Resource Connection, and the Morro Bay Lions Foundation have given away 4 safe and reliable cars to individuals and families to help them improve their lives and help others in need. This process works like this. Members of the community in need of a car can apply to the Community Resource Connection. The Community Resource Connection reviews and vets the applicants and selects a recipient for each quarterly car donation. Bill Todd and his son Mike find and purchase and repair the cars, with each car receiving a 65-point inspection and repairs as needed, including a smog test required for the title transfer. The Morro Bay Lions Foundation now funds this process, paying for the purchase and repair of the cars and providing temporary titling, insurance, and licensing until they are given to the recipients. The gift of these cars has made a very positive impact on the lives of the recipients, with many of them having become more self-sufficient and able to help others. One of this year's recipients was a young single mother of a preteen daughter whose car had died, and she was riding her bicycle to work to maintain her job, and often had to leave her daughter with Grandma because she didn't have a way to take her to school. There are other compelling stories, but I don't have time to share them with you this evening. The Morro Bay Lions Foundation is very thankful that we can be part of this worthy community activity. Our foundation is funded by the donation from Lions Club members, cars that are given to the foundation and sold, and cash donations from community members. We'll appreciate your support in spreading the word about donating cars to the foundation that you or your family or friends may not need and do not want to bother to sell. The foundation can provide a receipt for the Kelly Blue Book value of the car. Thanks for listening and supporting the Community Resource Connection and the Morro Bay Lions Club.
Thanks, Ray. Appreciate it. Mandy Davis and then Jeff Heller. Welcome.
Hey there, how are you? My name's Mandy Davis. I live here in Morro Bay. Please excuse me if I cough. I'm not contagious. I did have that nasty flu. I was in the hospital. I.e., you don't want it. Anyway, what I would like to do is I would like to address something that has already happened in the past. It's about the waterfront portion of the DWSP, the strategic plan, and something that you've already approved.
Mandy, excuse me, we're having this on consent. Do you want to speak to that consent item then, or do you want to just speak to it now?
But the waterfront portion that you've already approved?
Are you talking about the DWSP that we're going to be speaking to?
I'm talking about the waterfront portion that you have already approved.
Okay, pardon me.
Okay, so
right,
can I have a little bit of extra time here?
Sure,
Thank you.
If we can make some adjustments.
So,
thanks, Mandy.
I can only make the assumption that potentially you were not informed of the import of what an ESHA is at the time that you did approve that strategic plan. If you had known how important ESHAs are and how difficult it is to establish one, and even more so how difficult it is to delete one on an LCP, I think that maybe you might have given this a little more thought. A number of ESHAs were eliminated on that particular plan or that strategic plan or that you had on the map. And every single one of those, to my knowledge, and I know this estuary and this harbor very well, are very viable eelgrass bed. Let me read to you what exactly, according to the California Coastal Act, Section 30107.5, what an ESHA is. An ESHA is an area in which plant or animal life or their habitats are either rare or especially valuable because of their special role in an ecological system which could be easily degraded by human activities and development. The ESHAs were established by the Coastal Commission for some very specific reasons, and as most of us know how important eelgrass habitat is to the ecology of this area, I cannot even begin to imagine why you didn't take that into consideration. It would take an EIR, it would take independent biologists, it would take, and in order to get an LCP amendment, it would be subject to the approval of the Coastal Commission. And you'd have to jump through some major hoops. So I know this is not a done deal. I am really distressed that you have not looked at the ESHA issue as closely as you should have. And quite honestly, if you move forward with this, there are going to be some huge ramifications. And I just think that you guys need to understand that. You need to research ESHAs. You need to research our particular ESHAs here.
I know we went over. If you can conclude, please.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and take that in consideration before this goes any farther.
Thanks,
okay?
Mandy. Thank you. Jeff Heller, and then Tina Metzger.
Jeff Heller, Before I start, I'm wondering if someone could introduce me to the new council member with the white shirt and the tie there. I don't think I've seen him before.
Yes, it's Matt's brother, Mike.
Okay, Mike, thank you for sitting in this evening. I appreciate it. I want to thank the council for an effort made a few weeks ago, which came to the difficult decision to look for project director / owner's agent for the WRF project. I think it's a difficult decision and one of the most important decisions you've made for this project, and I want to thank you for it. I'm doing all that I can to assist your city manager in looking for qualified candidates, and it's a light at the end of the tunnel for those of us who have a lot of questions about the project. I also would like to suggest, because this is such a critical role, and I know you're on a tight calendar, but this is such a critical role, I'd like to suggest that you not issue the RFP until this person or persons are on board, because one of the most important things they're going to do is work immediately with staff and consultants and the bidding contractors to negotiate and discuss the proposals that they'll be preparing over the next 90 days. So I think the city manager's on a pretty fast track in getting somebody on board. And if there's some way you could delay issuance of the RFP and coordinate that with him, I think that would be a very helpful step and eliminate the possibility of other design-build firms from withdrawing prematurely. Thank you very much.
Tina Metzger, and then Barbara Dorr.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I'm Tina Metzger, a resident of Morro Bay. I agree completely with what Jeff Heller said, and I'm here to ask if you could consider a policy change in for the city concerning when a vote is taken by the council and the vote passes, that the city clerk repeat that motion slowly back to you to make sure that you know that it was taken down correctly and that the citizens in attendance and the people watching their TV sets, they have that opportunity to hear that motion again. Every council, every board of supervisors that I've ever spoken before, the city clerk or the clerk of the hearing repeats that past motion back after the successful vote is taken. And I've noticed that this is not a consistent process here, and I think it would be an improvement on the process to make sure that the vote, the motion that was taken and the vote taken is repeated back by the City Council for the benefit of you, city staff, and the public. So I would request that that be a consistent process here. And is this the proper time to pull items off the consent agenda?
There's public comment for consent as well.
Oh, good. I recommend that we pull item A3.
Okay. Then if I get a speaker slip from you for consent, you've made your comments.
Oh, no, I think I did, in addition to this topic one.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we need to talk about the height issue. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tina. Barbara Dorr.
Sorry, I'm sitting there sleeping. Barbara Dorr, resident Morro Bay. I guess I'll have to go with the positive first so I don't get cut off at the end. October 12th, my mom, 96, fell in the backyard, and the paramedics, fire, were so outstanding in our city, and we are so lucky. Any funding they need, give it. And I actually think the police car was out there first. It was rather a panic, and everything ended up fine, and she went to the hospital and convalescent, and she's home, and she's working on it, but thank you very, very much. Okay, on the wharf, South Bay site, I sure wish you'd put the odor prevention measures on that site like you did on all the others. It didn't have it included in the budget. On commissions and on the the Wharf PAC and the GPAC and the Rec Commission, you've continually reduced the size of the advisory committees or reduced the amount of times they're meeting. We don't get enough people at public hearings and out in the evening for public comment. Don't reduce our advisory committees. Please replace those who have resigned on the Wharf Advisory Committee and do whatever you can there to keep it going. And protect all the eelgrass you can when you watch the NEP videos and stuff. I mean, our estuary has lost 80-90% of its eelgrass. I concur with the woman who was up here earlier. We have to do something to protect it. It's our city, our community. But again, thank you very, very much to city staff.
Thanks, Barbara. David Nelson. That's all I have for speaker slips for public comment for items not on the agenda.
Good evening, David Nelson. Got this in the mail. It says water reclamation facility update. Well, do we have a water reclamation or do we have a sewer? It's my understanding we've got this cut down to a sewer plant now, so the idea that it's water reclamation I think was a little bit misleading on this. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about tonight is I'm not going to stay for the for C2, but I'd like to comment that I think that there's a bidder on this that we've paid a lot of money to, and I don't think that it's right that one of the bidders out of 3 have been compensated for stuff that the other 2 people will probably have to redo anyway. So I think that's unfair to have somebody who's been working on this project as consultants to be bidding on it. I think stacks the deck against other bids and other kind of technology. That's the main 2 things I have. I'm really, there's so many things going on, like the harbor plan that's up for discussion on the consent calendar. I read through some of it today. It's a big document, and I know everybody's not going to read about it, but there's certain portions of it that really irritate me as a citizen of Morro Bay. And one part, well, I'm going to save this for that, but anyway, that's my thing on the water reclamation. And the other thing is, we talk about site approval. Now, so many sites have been approved as being okay, and then we choose one like Rigetti, and then we take it off the table. Then we choose another one, and we take that off the table, and we end up at the furthest one out of town. I'm sorry, it's going to cost a whole lot of money to everybody in town not to have it closer to our existing sewer plant, and you're sending out an RFP, and we don't really have a site. I mean, we're talking about South Bay, but is that the site? We talked about Rigetti as a site. That was a site. Then it went away. This is a moving target to citizens here. We don't know what's going on, and I go to most of the meetings, and I can guarantee you my neighbors don't know about it. And, you're saying we have the public informed, but I don't think you're informing the public. I just saw this document that we're talking about on C3 today. I mean, I don't know why my name's not on an email list. I go to all the meetings. I sign up on all the sheets. I just send in another email request to be put on it. But, I'm sure I'm not the only one that misses this stuff. So, anyway, there's a lot of problems here. And I think if you keep moving forward, it's just going to make for bigger problems.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you. Betty Winholtz, that's the last speaker slip I have for public comment.
Thank you. I cannot stay for the meeting. I have to get back to work, so I want to speak to A3 now. I already submitted a comment about my concern about it being on consent. When you make this kind of major land change, that it needs to be a public hearing, whether or not it's in the LCP or the zoning ordinance or whatever. Because my belief is when it comes time for the LCP to come back to you, staff can turn to this document and say, oh, look, you approved this back when, so yeah, it's 44 feet. It's not the 30 that it currently is. So I strongly object to the change in the height limit for the downtown area. And I object because, for that reason, I object because it's more than just Morro Bay Boulevard and Main Street. It includes all those residential neighborhoods that's on the map that's right before it. And there's no distinguished statement in the document saying whether it just applies to businesses or residentials as well. And so that's a little bit confusing and undefined. I also object because I believe that Morro Bay is not growing. And I say that because I moved here in the 80s, and our census in 1980 was 9,996. Okay, and the highest I've ever seen it is around 10,004. But mostly it fluctuates between 10,000 and 10,400, and in the last census in 2010, it was actually at 10,200. We had lost population. And I believe that is because we've turned over so many of our regular long-term housing units to vacation rentals. And even though we've added 600 new housing units since I was on council, say 10 years ago, our population's still gone down because people are using those either as second homes or vacation rentals. So we're not a town that's growing. So to say that we need 3 to 4 stories downtown for 1,800 more housing people or units, 900 units with potentially 2 people in each, that's not the way to get it or the place to get it. I think where you need to get more housing units is by honoring our zoning, that when it says R4, you have to build R4. When it says R3, you have to build R3. You don't allow, as we continue to allow, an R1, a single-family home, in R4 zoning. My other reasoning is that maybe staff thinks that this will help address our need that we have to report to the state every 5 years, that we have to show that we can house so many people, whether we actually fulfill that or not, of course. And it has to be moderate to very low income. We tried that experiment down on Surf and Main Street. We have a number of those workforce houses where you work below, live above. I campaigned there last year. Those units are vacation rentals.
Thanks, Betty. That concludes our public comment for items not on the agenda. Public comment or for an item on the agenda? Public comment for items not on the agenda? Okay. Thanks. Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Okay, thanks.
Good evening, Mayor Irons, council and staff members. Kristen Headland, Morro Bay, homeowner, 27 years. I'm here to address the consent agenda item A3.
So, Kristen, I'm sorry, but we have public comment for consent.
Yeah, is consent agenda.
This isn't the public comment for the consent agenda. Can I save your public comment for consent, or can you not stay?
Well, I'll stay.
Okay, all right. I just want to clarify because this isn't public comment for the A3 item. Is that the one you're speaking to?
I just want to make sure that there's going to be a discussion.
There will be a public comment for that. I'll open a public comment for the consent agenda, which A3 is on, and then we'll keep your card, and then you can do that. Thank you. Sorry. Thanks very much. A couple reasons. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but if we're speaking to that item, I just want to keep that consistent with that as well. So I don't have any more speaker slips for public comment. I'll close public comment and bring it back to council. And then I'm looking for some responses on some of these and looking for council to make seel we're covering all these. Particular one about waterfront portion of DWSP and the ESHA comment, eelgrass. As a note, we're doing an eelgrass program policy with our Harbor Advisory Board right now, so we're addressing the importance of eelgrass for one, but that was one of the, I think that was Mandy on that, but the other one is for ESHA on the waterfront portion of the DWSP. Can you respond to that?
Certainly. The DWSP Downtown Waterfront Strategic Plan is not where you find our ESHA policies. Our ESHA policies are found in the Local Coastal Program. As you're aware, we are in the process of updating that, and we're doing a complete update and rewrite and new mapping for all of our ESHA areas in the city. And so when we're done with that effort, it should be much better and much more comprehensive, and we will have better maps to show where ESHA is and where we've located it since the original maps were published when the document was adopted by the city. So we are moving down that process, but it's not part of the DWSP. It's part of the overall general plan and LCP update process.
Okay, thanks. And then the other question about pausing on the RFP before getting a project manager. From a council perspective, we've given direction to keep moving forward on the RFP in the essence of time, as it meets all the schedules as far as funding and a completed project for the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and haven't. And if there's any others on council want to comment, plus Scott to comment on this as well, but that's not going to interrupt the process for the RFP. And Scott, I don't know if you had any added to that.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Heller for his generosity and time and meeting with me several times to talk about what would make for a really good project manager and scoping out potential candidates and helping with that process has been tremendously helpful for me, and really trying to make this move as quickly as possible, but thorough enough that we get the right person. So thank you, Mr. Heller.
Anybody else on that? Okay. And then I think there was another one about eelgrass, but I think I addressed that. And then the official site, and I'm going to look to Joe on that. So we've got a preferred site. The official site will be determined once the EIR is approved or adopted.
There's been many meetings where the council has discussed different sites, and I don't remember the date of the meeting, but the council specifically identified the South Bay site as the preferred site. The reason it's being referred to as a preferred site is because you can't make an absolute decision on purchasing and acquiring a site until the environmental analysis is done, meaning the EIR, the Environmental Impact Report, is done. You have entered into an MOU that governs how that purchasing will be done in terms of costs and other things that the city would be willing to do, and that was approved in public as well. So you have, I've been here when you've done it, so I know you have selected a preferred site more than once. And right now the preferred site is South Bay, and we're moving forward on the environmental analysis based on that site. We can't complete the environmental analysis until we have a site that's the environmental analysis is going to focus on. It will also focus on alternatives because by law it has to, but it needs to have a project site, and that right now is the preferred site, which is the South Bay site.
And as far as the design build portion of the RFP, we're working in parallel on that effort as far as the environmental impact report and the RFP for a design build. And Rob, you might have to...
That is correct. If we had the luxury of all the time in the world, probably wouldn't have recommended this approach, but we don't. So we're working on parallel paths with a strategy in the RFP to deal with potential unknown mitigation measures that may come out of the environmental review.
But the contract that would result from the RFP process won't be approved until the environmental analysis is done and the EIR has been certified.
Correct.
Great. Thanks for that clarity. Were there any other items on there that from the that I might have missed?
Yeah.
Were there any other?
I had one. Yeah.
Not questions so much, but no. Did we catch everything
no, we
on
didn't.
here?
Ms. Metzger has asked a couple of times about reading back the motion, and then also I believe she referred to, not by name, but a roll call, a vote, so that the public would know who voted which way. And Mayor, I don't know how you, since you presided the meetings, feel about that, nor what the process would be, but I know that's been requested a couple of times. So the question is, can the motion be read back as we make a motion, and then can the vote be publicly announced, the ayes and the noes?
Ms. Metzger and I spoke before the meeting, and I suggested this might be an item that that the council examine during the policy updates that are being worked on currently.
Okay.
Just for the record, though, with regard to the actual vote, again, every time I've been here, when there's been a vote and it hasn't been, it's either announced as unanimous or the mayor says it's not unanimous and these are the people that voted against it. So I don't know what more information could be given.
Anything else? I think at any point, as far as roll call vote, there's actually a process in some municipalities where roll call is legally required versus a general voice vote.
Unless a particular municipality has its own ordinance that requires a roll call, there's no state law that requires a roll call vote. All that needs to happen is the public needs to be apprised of who voted, if it's not unanimous, who voted yes and who voted no, and that's what's described at the end of every vote.
Okay. And I think in our policies, as it is now, it'd be at the discretion of the chair or the presiding officer, the mayor, to announce whether it's in a roll call vote or a voice vote.
Correct.
Thanks. Okay. Unless we want to, then those policies are coming back for review, and we can have those discussions as well. And I think I can make sure that as we do those votes that, 5-0 unanimous or 4-1 Mayor Irons dissenting, I can double up on that. Thanks. Anything else?
Did we address Mr. Green's second point about the WRF, quote unquote, my word, approval of just moving forward with a wastewater treatment facility versus a reclamation facility as well? And I know we've addressed it a couple of times. Maybe Rob could comment on that?
Sure.
Again, I don't remember which vote, what meeting it was, but I understand my direction is to move forward with a full water reclamation facility, and that was based in part on our potential funding partners stating that, the reasoning behind the qualification for a WIFIA loan was in part reclamation, and then we heard both the executive officer and the chair of the Central Coast Water Quality Control Board tell us that they would not recommend funding for just a plant that met minimum standards and discharged to the ocean.
Oh, no, go ahead.
And if I could just add, perhaps part of the confusion that's out there, I'm not really sure why it's confusing, but it seems to be. In April, the council did ask the staff to look at some other opportunities or some other approaches. And people are, I believe, misunderstanding that to be that the council said change the project to X, meaning just the water treatment. That's not what the council motion did. That's not what the council directed, and that's not what staff did based on that direction, and that's not where you are after that information was brought back to you to review, and you've now again said you want to have a water reclamation facility for the reasons that Mr. Livick said.
And I can add a little bit to that, because I actually did go back after the last meeting and pulled minutes, so I wanted to remember exactly when we did, what we did, and I actually read them again and looked at the motion to see what happened. And that's correct. On April 25th, we directed staff to come back with alternatives that were less costly focusing on either just secondary treatment, full secondary, or tertiary treatment, and later we could do recycling, because this was always conceived of as a two-phase project. First we'd build the sewer plant, and then we'd do the recycling. But then on July 11th, after we received the peer review, which we directed also at the April meeting, we asked them to look at the alternative sites, because one of the recommendations from the peer review was that there were cheaper sites. So we directed them to come back with more information on the 4 alternative sites. And John made the motion to bring back recommendations to proceed with an RFP for design build for a WWTF/WRF, i.e. combine the project into the treatment and facility in a single phase. And that was July 11th. And then on September 26th, we made the decision to pick the South Bay site as the preferred site for moving forward. So I think, and I wanted to do that to be clear myself, because it's important to keep the facts straight. And so that's based on my reading of all the minutes and of those meetings. So.
And how many times have we repeated this? 6? Okay. All right. Did we conclude everything then? Okay, thanks. All right, with that, that concludes public comment. We'll move on to consent. We have speaker slips for consent item number A3, and we have a speaker slip for consent item A5. And so what I'll ask for is, are there any other items to pull from consent for council?
Did you want to pull A6?
A6.
A3, A5, A6.
A3, A5, and A6. And so we'll go ahead and discuss everything except A3. And then when we get to A3, John and I will recuse ourselves because we have a financial interest in the downtown. So no different than when this was discussed before. We'll go ahead and recuse ourselves. We'll step down. Mayor Pro Tem Marlis McPherson will conduct and facilitate the meeting as Mayor Pro Tem.
And your financial interests are?
Our financial interests are owning property within the downtown.
As is mine.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay, so with that, item A5, did you want to speak to that first, Marlis? Sure, I'd take a motion to approve all items on consent agenda with the exception of items A3, A5, and A6.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. McPherson, second by Mr. Heading. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0.
Yeah.
Item A5, Marlis.
Sure. I wanted to pull this item because in the interests of transparency, I would ask the city attorney to please explain our response to the Morro Bay Action Team regarding the alleged Brown Act violation. And I know we have written a letter, and the letter is included in the agenda packet, but I think for the sake of the people watching at home and in the audience, I would just like an explanation, so if you don't mind.
Certainly. There was a letter received, as was said, from the Morro Bay Action Team, and there were two allegations made in that letter. One was that the city had violated the Brown Act because of the way that the agenda read for a design engineer contract, and there was also a alleged violation of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, because that contract was approved before an EIR, the Environmental Impact Report, was certified. The letter that was written, that was referred to, explains that the city did not violate either the Brown Act or the CEQA because the Brown Act wasn't violated because the contract that was described was a design engineering contract, and it's typical that the design engineering contract, the design engineer participates not only in the design of what's needed to be designed, but also if a contract's issued, then construction contract is issued, and this is for the lift station and infrastructure, force main and infrastructure for the potential wharf. And if that contract is let for that work, then the design engineer would also be the contract assistant, if you will, to staff in making sure that the job was done the way the design says it should be done. The letter felt that the agenda should have specifically said that the contract would include that construction part, and I didn't see any legal violation or Brown Act violation because design engineer contracts typically include that. With regard to the CEQA violation, the allegation was because the city approved it, was committed now to a contract for construction, that couldn't happen before the EIR. That's totally true. As I just said earlier, the city can't approve the construction contract until the EIR is done. The design engineer contract does not commit the city to hire that design engineer or pay that design engineer for the construction job unless the construction job is issued, and that's not going to happen before the EIR is certified.
And just to clarify, there is no need for the letting of a contract to be shown on the agenda as a public hearing item. That's appropriately a business item. Is that correct?
There's no special public hearing requirement. Only the Brown Act requirement that it has to be published at least 72 hours before the
right, which it was.
It absolutely was. More than 72 days.
Right.
Hours.
Appropriately noticed what we were going to be deciding and what we were. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Move approval of A5.
We have a motion to approve A5 by Mr. Heading, second by Mr. Makowetsky. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carries 5-0. Pardon me, you're absolutely right, Cynthia. My apologies. Public comment for A5. I know we're incombobulated because we're trying to bifurcate some of these items, but Cynthia, come on up for A5.
I would suggest that the council take an action to rescind its previous motion.
Okay, thanks.
I withdraw my motion.
And we need
to rescind. We need a motion to rescind it because you already approved it.
Okay.
Second.
Wait a minute.
So we have a motion to rescind.
Move to rescind.
Second.
Motion to rescind by Mr. Heading, second by Ms. McPherson. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. Cynthia, my apologies. Come on up, please.
Council for the city misunderstood the entire issue. The issue was that under CEQA, there's a definition for approval of a project, and this contract fit all the elements for approval of a project. It has nothing to do with when the EIR is done. And approval of a project happens for a land use project is designed as the decision by a public agency which commits the agency to a definite course of action in regard to a project. Commitment in this case means something that's irrevocable, and it's irrevocable if the project approval is not contingent upon anything like CEQA or a permit. And in this case, that's what you did. You took action on a project. You approved the project that was described in the contract. And that was the violation. The violation was not CEQA that we were complaining about. The violation we were complaining about is the fact that you approved this project under the guise of a contract approval, and then you didn't notice it as a project approval. It should have been noticed as a project approval, and it wasn't. And this is kind of a standard process that I'm seeing agencies use. They will call it a contract, and in that contract, all the elements for project approval will exist, so that if they are challenged on a future, say you take some action in the future saying you're approving the project now, and we say we want to challenge that approval, then you're going to point back to this November 14th, 2017 approval and say, oh no, we did it back there in November of 2017. So you're too late to challenge that approval now. It's a trick that's being used in public agencies. And you did approve a project on that night. And you did not agendize it as an approval, and you say that you are for transparency. But what this did was avoid the public hearing process, the 10-day notice and the public hearing.
Okay.
And I would really like it if we could get some response to that.
Okay, Cynthia, thanks. Barbara Dorr, and I think that's the last I have for public comment on item A5. And then all the rest of my public comment slips are for item A3.
Barbara Dorr, I guess first I'd like to say, when your city attorney is talking so much at your meetings, you have a procedural problem, and you have a problem with statement of motions and other issues. And tonight, I understand, I was a mayor, I was on a council, I've been staff to Orange County commissions, I've done my time. Usually you take a motion to change the order of the agenda from A3 to A5. There's a lot of people here, I think, for A3, and A3 comes before A5, so I would assume somewhere in your P&Ps, policies and procedures, or in Roberts, you should change the order of the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
And I agree with Cynthia.
That's all I have for public comment for item A5. I'm going to close public comment for item A5. Bring it back. Joe, do you have any response to that?
Certainly. First, with regard to the agenda, I thought you did ask the council whether it's okay to do what you did in terms of adjusting the agenda, but maybe I missed something. With regard to the, again, the concern that's been raised about this design engineering contract, there has been, except for you deciding that you want to go forward with a WRF, and you want to go forward with a preferred site, you need that direction in order for the EIR to be able to be a process, because otherwise we wouldn't know what the EIR should be analyzing. That same thing is true about this design contract. Because the force main and the piping for the force main are going to be part of this proposed project, it also has to be analyzed in the EIR, but it has to have some project definition before it can be analyzed. So part of the reason for the design work is so the EIR folks, the people preparing the EIR, know what that's going to be. And so that's why this design contract was approved. And it was only a design contract, plus the possibility of, if a contract for the work is done, that it's also going to be a construction management contract.
And there seems to be, were there any other comments on that?
Just my comment was, when I attended the meeting and voted on it, the agenda item, as I recall, specifically stated, and I'm reading it from what was on the agenda, consideration of proposal by an approval of contract with Waterworks Engineers for engineering, operative word, design services. In my interpretation of that, and I think you just affirmed that, I did not vote to approve any project, just the design services for a potential project that may come back and be approved by the council. Is that correct?
That's my understanding as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
That's my understanding as well. I did not vote for a project. I voted for an engineering contract that will help us to define a project, but even that contract is looking at alternatives.
Yeah, and I might also add, this is obviously part of the WRF project, and we have approved the WRF project, and we have approved a contract that includes this as a subcontract. So in fact, we know we had to do this, so it's part of a larger project.
Just to be accurate, you've approved a proposed WRF project to be studied.
Right. Thank you. Yes, we are still working on it.
Okay.
Move approval of A5.
Okay, we have a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve item A5 Mr. Heading, second Mr. Makowiecki, to approve item A5. Further discussion? None. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. That concludes everything on. I have item A6. I'm just going to speak to item A6 before we get to item A3, and then we're going to recuse, and that'll close this down. Item A6 is receive the first quarter investment report. And first, I just want to say, Jen, thanks for this. It is on consent, but just wanted to make note of your work. Thanks for that. And I thought it'd be very valuable to bring back the portfolio performance sheet during the budget workshop. And I just want to put that out there for council, and it'd probably be informative for us to have that included in discussion and maybe a little bit more description. But it was very helpful, and appreciated the conversation we had in that regard. And with that, I'd move to approve item A6.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Irons, second by Marlis. Second by Marlis. And any further discussion? None? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. So item A3, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem, and you have speaker slips right here that I'll pass on to you. And John and I are going to recuse ourselves.
I have to wait till they leave the room, right? Okay. All right. Well, I hope you'll be patient with me since this is my first experience as Mayor Pro Tem. So I would like to begin by having staff give us a little bit of background about this, how this came to be on our agenda as a consent item, because there seems to be a rumor going around that there hasn't been public opportunity to comment on this project or on the guidelines themselves, on the downtown strategic plan. So it's really important, I think, for us all to understand the history of how we got here and exactly what we are deciding tonight. So, Scott, if you wouldn't mind starting off with that, I'd appreciate it.
Happy to. So the council last reviewed this back in September and adopted the overall. We adopted the waterfront guidelines and the guidelines that applied to both areas equally, and we didn't end up adopting the downtown portion of them, and hence we're here this evening to do that. This effort, though, started way back in 2016, back in the summer when council authorized the preparation of the downtown and waterfront strategic plan, sort of in concert with the general plan and LCP update that we're currently in the process of. We had two public workshops that folks attended. We had stakeholder interviews, several meetings between the Planning Commission, General Plan Advisory Committee, City Council to develop policy to put into the document. We released a draft of the downtown and waterfront strategic plan almost a little less than a year ago, and back in February of 2017. That draft contained the language that seems to be the issue at hand is the height limits in our downtown are at 30 feet currently, and the downtown and waterfront strategic plan identifies increasing that to 37 feet. And so there's some folks that are concerned about that, and that seems to be why this item is generating concern today. So that language was in the document back then. It's been posted on our website since then. And we've had approximately eight meetings between council and GPAC and the Planning Commission since that time, where folks could have come forward and expressed concern related to that. And some folks have come forward. Ms. Winholtz has come to a couple of our meetings and expressed concern over that height limit increase. But to this end, there was no desire on the part of any of the General Plan Advisory Committee or Planning Commission or even council to this point to change it. So it's carried forward. And so it remains in the downtown and waterfront strategic plan at 37 feet for the maximum height in the downtown. Ms. Winholtz did bring up some interesting comments when she came up earlier related to, well, we don't know if it applies to residential, and we don't know what zoning it applies to. Correct. It's not that level of detail is not in the downtown and waterfront strategic plan, nor if the council adopts the document tonight, do you automatically get to go do 37-foot buildings in the downtown? That's a development standard that lives in our zoning code. So we have to go back and amend our zoning code to include that policy in there. And inside of the zoning code is where we'll identify the zones where it's appropriate to have this. We're going through that process right now. These are parallel processes. We're updating comprehensively the zoning code. We've been to the General Plan Advisory Committee 2 meetings ago, where they reviewed the Module 2 of the zoning code update, which included development standards and included this increase to 37 feet in the downtown, and identified the zones where that would be located, and that would be in the commercial portions of it, not in the residential. And does provide buffering if you are in one of those commercial zones and you're immediately adjacent. The height limit in those areas would be 30 feet, not 37. So it is responsive to those types of things, not wanting to have tall buildings next to residential. The good news is it's not over again if the council makes a decision and adopts the document tonight, because in 2 weeks, on February 6th, the Planning Commission is taking up this exact same issue, where they'll be reviewing Module 2 of the zoning code update, where development standards are going to be reviewed, and this item is specifically in that update. So folks will have the opportunity to come speak to the Planning Commission and have a conversation there with them, and the Planning Commission will weigh in on what they feel about this. They've talked about it in the past, but getting public input and folks to show up to the meeting would be fantastic. I do encourage that. I think that about covers most of it.
Okay, if you would just explain a little bit of difference between this is a strategic plan and these are design guidelines, and that's explain the difference between that and the policy which the council will eventually enact, which actually is the zoning code, correct?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of items in the downtown and waterfront strategic plan which are action items. In fact, there's a implementation section at the back that tells us, you know, how to implement what we're implementing, what we're going to go do, and there's short-term, mid-term, and long-term items in there, and they're designed that way, and they're meant to be plugged into your goal-setting process that you'll go through coming up here pretty quickly. And so they don't set the policy as it relates to what our development standards are. It says, hey, we'd like to go there, you adopt it, then we go look and see what that would look like inside of our zoning code, because that's where our development standards live. And in our ordinances, not in a separate adopted plan.
And there were people who came to these meetings and supported raising that in the design guidelines to 37 feet. And can you explain what their rationale was for doing that?
So, yes. So that was related to economic development. Folks realize when you start looking at redeveloping properties in our downtown and wanting to have viable commercial businesses and encourage mixed use, to have residential above or even at secondary businesses on the second floors, 30 feet doesn't really get you there. When you start looking at commercial, their Class A retail, ceiling heights in those types of facilities are 16 feet. And then you have 18 inches to 2 feet between the next use that would be above it, which would be the residential. And then if you're looking at 9 or 10 foot ceilings, you're right at that 28-ish foot elevation with a flat roof. And if there's any topography on the site, meaning it's not dead flat, then we do averaging of the lot under the building footprint to measure the height, and you're not going to get there. You'll exceed the 30 foot. You wouldn't be able to get a second story there, or you're going to reduce the height of the retail, and you're going to have something that's less viable or less attractive to better retail type uses. It's one of the issues that we have currently out there when I've talked to some of the folks that do commercial real estate in town. The input that we received as part of stakeholder interviews with the commercial community and as part of the workshops that we did noted that we need to take a look at these things, and it'd be great if we had residences down there so they could facilitate a better downtown, one that's maybe have more stores open in the downtown, and so people living there and it's more vibrant and that type of thing. And so those were the comments that came out of those outreach efforts, and then you have to look at and see what that means. If we really want to have viable uses, then it's math, really, when you talk about getting the height there, and that's where they came up with the 37 feet.
And do we currently have some buildings in town that are taller than that?
We do have some that are definitely exceed 30 feet, sure. We have a few.
And so in the process, you would review any applications for any permits for houses, and you would know, or for commercial establishments, and you would know, and so the guidelines are just a guideline. Is that
the guidelines, and then this item would have to come back through the zoning code to the city council for adoption, and then we have to send it off to the coastal commission for certification. By no means are we close to done. This is sort of the first step in looking at those types of things, and then it'll be better defined through the zoning code process as to where specifically this would be implemented. Again, it's the DWSP puts a circle or a polygon type thing around the downtown and says, here's our downtown, and then says, hey, look at these goals and policies in this area, and these are the things we'd like to accomplish here. And then to be more specific, you push some of those things out into the zoning code, which would be like the height issue.
Okay. Any questions here from my colleagues? Matt?
Sure, I do have a question. Earlier we had a question about ESHAs, and could you go over once again, as this is a strategic plan, the difference between a strategic plan with ESHAs and our GP and our LCP?
Yes. The DWSP is not meant to be an environmental document. It's not meant to be the city's local coastal program or general plan. In those two documents, we have sections that deal with environmentally sensitive habitat. We are in the process, again, of updating our general plan and local coastal program. We're combining the two documents, and we're substantially updating the ESHA policies, and providing new maps to map areas where we know we have ESHA. Our current mapping isn't very good and doesn't identify some of these areas. And then, again, just sort of bolstering the policies that we have in there. We've had conversations with Coastal on what they want it to look like and those types of things. We're in the process of reviewing an internal draft of that document that we're going to be sending up to Coastal probably within a week to get their input on it. And so they'll be very curious to see what the ESHA policies say, because we sat down and had a lot of back and forth with them on a couple of different meetings. So we are going down that path, and we're certainly very cognizant of the issue that the community has, that the Bay has with eelgrass as well.
So moving forward, say for instance with a strategic plan like this, how is it used? Is it just necessarily the Planning Commission that would use this? Would it be the City Council in conjunction with the planning? Would it be for our business community, or all of the above?
It's all of the above. It's really some of the things we got to go do. We're supposed to go maybe work with other groups that are out there, historical societies, committees, things like that. The chamber, part of the things is to come up with some signage for wayfinding. Come up with a plan for street furniture that we could have to enhance the look of the downtown, those types of things. And those involve different groups. We're not going to come up with what the street furniture looks like for the downtown. We would go down and talk to the businesses down there and say what they want. And so we need to sort of partner up with organizations like the chamber to put groups together to go down that road. And again, at the end of the document, the DWSP has the implementation section in it and gives you that sort of short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals that we can, again, plug into the goal-setting process.
So with that in mind, then this is very much of a living document that kind of grows with what people's interest, business interest in the town, especially as it relates to the downtown segment, as it connects to the waterfront segment. It's very much of a dynamic document.
It is, and it's meant to, hopefully improve the way our downtown looks and better connect those two areas. One of the goals of the document was to connect our downtown and our waterfront. It has a fairly significant economic development component to it, and it has it has a timeline of about 10 years. The document does. So hopefully we'll be mostly done with all of the items it tells us to go do within that time frame, if we're lucky. So.
When I read the downtown waterfront strategic plan and look specifically at the point of contention that's been raised by some folks, when we look at that 30 feet and especially that 7 feet that goes above, that 7 feet is to be used for what sort of construction? Or
okay, so it's increasing the height of the regular building to 37 feet, and then there's architectural extensions that are allowed to extend above that. Because you have equipment that goes on roofs, you have elevators and those types of things, and it recognizes that and places a limit on that, so it adds another 7. Hence the reason you've heard 44 out there. Again, this is all subject to design review. The document also includes design guidelines for our downtown that we're supposed to follow when buildings come forward, that type of thing. So, yeah, it covers those.
So, in one way, you could consider the downtown waterfront strategic plan in lieu of a architectural review board. It's a living document that isn't as stringent as a board of people that would delineate what is to be built, but however, these are guidelines that could inform the building of in different areas of the town.
That's one of the intents, is to, when people come into often what happens when you have applicants that come into the counter, or people that are looking at property, they'll ask, well, what do you want to, we see this vacant piece of property here. What would you like us to do there? Well, this plan kind of tells you that. It has some of the opportunity sites identified and identifies projects that could go there that the city might be interested in. And then it has design guidelines that can be used, and you would show those to the to potential applicants and say, these are the things we'd like you to follow. And then I think it would be used in the review process going through Planning Commission and even to City Council. So it does serve that function.
All right, thank you. That's all my questions.
Brad, no questions? Okay, we'll open it up for public comment, and the first speaker is Kristen Headland.
Hello again. I guess the mayor's not here, but good evening, council, staff members. My name is Kristen Headland. I've lived here 27 years. Is that mic not on? Okay. I've lived here 27 years. I'm a homeowner. I want to speak on this item A3, and for me, I see that it's a real game changer for our whole community, this fishing community that we all love and enjoy, and it's very unique. And I think that by doing a height increase will affect the residents that live here. And Scott, thank you very much for your whole presentation. I look forward to the meeting on it. So in regards to the meeting, according to government code, there should be a 10-day public notice, and that includes posting in the newspaper. And I'm going to look forward to the meeting where the public get to come and give feedback. And so for me, I feel that I'm here to speak for the voices of the working class and the elderly people. If this area here goes to 3 stories, well, the people that are going to be displaced because the property owners decide they want to build 3-story units, where are they going to go? Rents around here are very expensive. Delmar School has 368 students. 54% of those students are socially, economically disadvantaged, according to the school accountability report card, and over 50% of those students receive free or discounted lunches. And I imagine that a lot of those parents work here in our town, and if they're affected by this change, where are they going to live? Rents cost too much. I'm sure that people that live in that area are going to be thinking about building homes, because it's all about the financial gain when it comes to real estate. And what about the elderly that may live in that district? If they get an eviction notice, where are they going to go? So I'm very grateful that you're going to have another meeting and people, the public, get a chance to come and give their opinion. And I'll look forward to it. And thank you very much for all your time and energy.
Thank you, Kristen. Skip Sorkup.
Good evening, council, staff, audience. My name is Skip Sorich, resident of Morro Bay. Oh, quite all right. I find this very interesting in regards to, and it's good that they're going to have another meeting, in regards to height changes. I come to find out that there is no city ordinance, is that correct, on height?
There is a city ordinance.
There is a city ordinance, okay, I was informed differently. So I believe that when you have an affected area, I would think that everybody in that area has been notified by written notice and by newspaper, as been previously asked. The increase could go up to 44, is that correct? And my question is, what is that going from? What height from? Is it 25 or 30? And my question would be, if it's from 25 to 44, that's, in percentage-wise, that's quite an increase, percentage-wise, even if it was at 30 feet. So I think that's something that you should be looking into. Other than that, I think it's a very important thing that you take this under consideration for all of this whole community, not just of that one area. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. And the staff will respond to your questions when we're finished here with public comment.
Very good.
Okay, I have Nancy and Norm Williams. Are you both going to speak?
Mayor Pro Tem and City Council members. It looks like to me it's going to be 44 feet according to my public school math. 37 plus 7 makes 44. That is a tremendous change as far as I'm concerned. Morro Bay has a history of being a small fishing village. The strategic plan, the DWSP, says it wants to maintain the character of Morro Bay as an eclectic small-town seaside character. However, I believe the guidelines that are being set forth are in direct conflict with this stated goal. As a longtime resident, I am concerned about this. Now let's take a look at some of the existing lots, some of the existing vacant lots that are coming up. We have those are located on Harbor, Morro, the Embarcadero, and Marina. And I guess we all know, I believe, the Bank of America is going to be closing down. I'm trying to visualize a 3-story building there that goes up 44 feet and what that's going to do to our corridor when we go walking, taking our walk to downtown. So it impacts the residents, not just that are close to where the projects are, but when we like to take our walks downtown. I think the preservation of the public view corridors, the bay, the sand spit, Morro Rock, these are all important to the citizens of Morro Bay, the people that live here. My wish is that this part of the plan be looked at closely for public discussion and adjusted to align with the existing character of the city, our seaside village. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Erica Crawford. And next up is Nancy Bast.
Good evening, honorable City Council members and City staff. My name is Erica Crawford. I'm with the Morro Bay Chamber, which is a nonprofit 501c6 organization governed by a board of 12 directors who are business owner-operators in this city. Our chamber, which is the only multi-industry business advocacy group in Morro Bay, represents 292 businesses from each of our 4 economic districts, including Quintana, North Morro Bay, the Downtown District, and Embarcadero. Each of the businesses invested in our chamber would like to thrive and to grow here in Morro Bay. The purpose of the Downtown Waterfront Strategic Plan, just to quote from the plan, is to connect and enhance Morro Bay's downtown and waterfront areas and provide a more uniform feel to each district. It is intended to serve as a guide for private development and public investment, end quote. Because of its extensive public input conducted over the course of well over a year and in the form of dynamic and interactive community workshops and public meetings that were well attended, this plan has the potential, again, I think because of the outreach, to unite residents, business owners, commercial property owners, the development community, and city staff in a path forward for our local economy. The impact of Diablo Canyon's closure to our regional economy is estimated by the EBC to be in the arena of $1 billion. $1 billion, which is the equivalent to the complete loss of tourism to San Luis Obispo County, and that will be impacting local schools in our school district. The California Public Utilities Commission's recent vote to reject an $85 million mitigation package that would have softened the blow to our regional economy from this closure is a message to every city and county governing body that says we need to strategize, to plan, and to innovate a way out from such a massive economic impact. The City of Morro Bay has worked diligently in this regard, and the Downtown Waterfront Strategic Plan is one product of that effort. Community development, Scott Graham's leadership on getting this strategic plan ready for action, while also leading the general plan and LCP updates, which are due for completion at the end of the calendar year, is to be commended. Chapter 4 of the plan, the implementation section, outlines clearly defined actions with priority, timing, and lead or support entities to accomplish each action and to keep city staff accountable to accomplishing those actions. We urge Council to keep momentum, to stay the course, and to move forward on the adoption of the Downtown Waterfront Strategic Plan this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Erica. Nancy Bast and then Tina Metzger.
Good evening, Nancy Bast, resident. This item should be tabled until it can come back for a more transparent public meeting. The item was agendized when the public's focus was on the all-important sewer issue, so there was no awareness or public comment at the Planning Commission meeting and almost none at the Council meeting. The staff report is 106 pages, in which the increased height recommendation is obscure among page after page of charts, photos, and text. At the original council hearing, it did not pass, and now that we have been made aware of it, we have an opportunity to voice our opinion against increased heights. In scanning all the charts and comments of public workshop conclusions, nowhere do I see that the participants wanted the height limits to be increased to 3 or 4 stories high. What I do see is that they repeatedly want to keep this small town character that we have. Common sense tells me those heights would shadow the one-story businesses and homes that abound in that downtown area and negatively affect property values and quality of life. If you don't believe me, there's a good example. It also could preclude rooftop solar. The good example is of how oppressively this would affect one-story properties can be seen next to the Masterpiece Hotel at Main and Surf Streets, where a single-story residence 3 feet away to the east is shadowed by a 30-foot high wall and the full length of the property. Now that's oppressive. The staff does not have a mandate, or does the council, to change our town into something they might think is right, especially using this backdoor manner of the consent calendar. The height increase is a bad idea, and it deserves no further consideration. I have a little suggestion for Scott. I would like you to speak into the mic because my old ears can't understand you, and you talk so fast that I really can't understand you. I hope you will consider it. Thank you.
Next up is, thank you, Nancy, Tina Metzger, and then Jeff Odell.
Good evening again. Tina Metzger, resident of Morro Bay. I also am very concerned about the height increase. There's so many beautiful views of the rock, even over buildings where you have the mound of the rock. It's our landmark. You raise the height of buildings, we're gonna lose that. I just really want, and I know everybody's really well-meaning, but I want to emphasize to Scott and all the people that have volunteered their time. Most of us don't want this to turn into a Huntington Beach. We love the town the way it is, and the scale of the town, and the amount of light through every view shed to the water, and to the rock, and all the little tiny views we get in between buildings. We don't want to become another Huntington Beach. There's no soul left in Huntington Beach. I remember that old pier town from my childhood, and it's so sad to go there now. So please don't take away our soul. And please don't take away our view sheds to the rock, the jetties, the water, the sky. Anyway, that's my, those are my thoughts on raising it even, the buildings even higher. And I know it's not just me. When I walked door to door while I was campaigning, just about everybody said, please keep our town the way it is. We don't want to become Santa Cruz. We just like the town the way it is. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tina. Jeff Odell, and then Barbara Dorr.
Good evening, council members. I'm Jeff Odell. I'm a Morro Bay resident. First, I'd like to thank Council Member Davis for the unsolicited plug of my artwork. That's a pleasant surprise to begin the new year. Unexpected. Thank you. I'm here to speak about the height. In the middle 80s, a very extensive view shed analysis was done in the city of Morro Bay by a very large group of graduate students from Cal Poly. I believe that view shed templates probably originated with that process. They identified sites within the city of Morro Bay that were appropriate for a 30-foot structure, which would, if it were placed right within the context of the view shed, the topography, and the placement of the buildings on the streets, would be virtually invisible. The way this would be accomplished would be everything that faced the street would be at one story. As you came in to the next development quadrant, if you want to call it that, you go to 2 stories. At the center of the block, you would have 3 stories. It would not cause a shadow. It would be virtually invisible as it was analyzed. The problem with the map is that just says it's going to be 44 feet here. If your zoning ordinance, your height limitation in your zoning ordinance for that area says 44 feet, every single project proposed will ask for it. And on a case-by-case basis, you will be sued. I sat there for 4 years. The neighborhood that you live in, Mr. Davis, the Cloisters, was created by a series of lawsuits. I was on the negotiating committee for years. If you do not word your ordinances, if you do not pick specific sites to allow a height of 30 feet or 37 feet with 7 feet of appurtenances, you're just going to cause a problem, and everybody's going to want it. And what you're going to end up with is, I hate to say it, is a town that I no longer go to, and that's San Luis Obispo. That place is a canyon now, and I used to love that place. So I would just simply say, I don't see anything specific on here other than 44 feet. And the several people that I've spoken to in that area are livid. And I don't care how many workshops and public meetings and everything that you've had or that you think people listen to, nobody knows about this. So I'm just going to say, if you do plan to allow 44 feet in that area, and that's how you codify it, you're going to have a lot of litigation. or you're going to have a lot of 44-foot high buildings. So I just want to share that with you, and I hope that at some point, first of all, I would table this as a policy and say that and be more specific. Identify the locations that you're going to allow the heights, and let's have public meetings about that. You just set my voter precinct on fire, so
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Dorr and then Casey Caldwell.
Barbara Dorr. I'm just going to read because I get very disappointed at the actions of these meetings. Please do not approve the downtown plan tonight, and please do not raise the height limit to 44 feet tonight or ever. Instead, include the downtown plan for consideration as part of the overall general plan LCP approval process. Let all residents comment at formal public hearings. Let the residents decide if this plan actually connects downtown and the waterfront. That was the desire expressed by businesses and residents. I don't think it does. The plan could be a disastrous change to our downtown. Once a 44-foot structure is built, it can't be unbuilt. Look at Redondo Beach. They went 12 stories, and now they're down low, but they're dinosaurs. On September 12th, the downtown plan failed by a 2-to-1 vote. Why is it back on tonight's agenda? There was not a council motion to bring the item back to the city council. There was never a motion to reconsider the downtown plan. What if we did this for all failed agenda items? Sort of like, what is it, Groundhog Day? It just goes on forever and ever. I mean, I thought there were laws, procedures that you were to follow in bringing something back. If staff wants to push it, I know you discussed it. I'll go on. I'll read. Even worse, the downtown plan was placed on tonight's consent calendar, contrary to our P&Ps. It is controversial. And it was voted down, which makes it more controversial. At the September 12th meeting, Planning Director Graham stated the issue would be placed on an agenda and presented in an edit format. The 3 council members would review McPherson's comment suggestion at a future meeting and adopt or not. Additionally, meeting chair Makowetsky said the plan would come back with McPherson's suggestions, quotes, and public suggestions for this vote by the council's 3. What public suggestions were included in the plan for tonight's council action? I don't know of any. How was the document changed at the staff level? Is it appropriate that one council member has the power to sit down with staff, make changes to the plan? There was no council motion directing staff to work with Councilmember McPherson. And I'm not blaming you, Marlis. If no changes were made, who is pushing for formal reconsideration of the downtown plan without a vote of the council? This plan failed. It shouldn't be here. It should be tabled, dumped. Please allow the residents to review the downtown plan as part of the overall general plan update. Don't vote tonight. You don't have to. You can let the whole community act. Waterfront portion, has anybody ever considered ADA parking when you take away all the streets? Examples, could you give a list of examples of 37-foot commercial developments in downtown Morro Bay so we citizens can look and see if we like it or not? The Wharf Park postcard. Oh, and a point of order. People watch these council meetings. I do, and I go back and forth. And if I see an agenda starting A3, I would expect my council members to have made their declaration of conflict of interest when this agenda item was called to order.
I'm sorry, Barbara.
And then step down.
I have to ask you to wrap up. Thank you. Casey Caldwell and then Cynthia Hawley.
Hello, Acting Mayor and City Council.
I don't know what I'm called.
My name is Casey Caldwell. I'm a Morro Bay resident. And I think the 3 of you and a lot of people in this room know that I'm a big proponent of design guidelines. I'm so glad that many of our citizens worked hard to include them in the strategic plan. I attended several of the workshops on guiding the City Council and staff to how we wanted the downtown and the waterfront to look like in the next 10 years. I participated in the workshops. I don't remember in any of the groups I was in or any of the groups that stood up to give their presentation that a limit of 37 to 44 feet was ever discussed. I don't recall that in the workshops, and I certainly would have commented. Scott, I appreciated your summary of how we got here tonight. I know it's not the first time that you've all heard people come at the last minute to complain or voice their strong opinions about something that they didn't know about. And it's just the way it works. It's always worked that way. We don't know about these things until the last minute. And I think Jeff Odell is right that most of the people in our community aren't aware that this is before you tonight on the consent calendar. So I would recommend that you take it off the consent calendar, table it for a while. Let's see what happens at the Planning Commission meeting in a couple of weeks. That'll give the citizens time to make plans to attend and make public comment at that time. My concern is that the downtown map includes a lot of residential area. It's not just commercial. And as soon as someone on Pacific builds a home at 44 feet with a turret or a tower or a large mansard roof, a neighbor on the adjoining perpendicular or parallel street is going to want to do the same thing, even if it's just outside the downtown area map. Before you know it, we're off to the races. This is how it spreads throughout the town. And Mr. Heading opened the meeting tonight talking about how much visitors loved the feel of the town, who had attended the Bird Festival. That whole town feel is going to go away. I've been to San Luis many times throughout the past year. I've watched these large projects going up, and it's heartbreaking. I don't want Morro Bay to slowly become what San Luis is going through now. It's just crazy down there. So, Marlis, you said guidelines are just guidelines, but they're very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia Hawley and then David Nelson.
I'm Cynthia Hawley on behalf of the Morro Bay Action Team. The definition in the government code for general plan is a plan for physical development of a city that identifies the community's land use as it relates to future growth and development. This is part of the general plan, as by the definition in the government code. The city staff does not have the authority to simply declare, as Mr. Leivik did at the last discussion of this plan, that the downtown waterfront strategic plan is not part of the general plan. This amounts to an evasion of public notice and hearings and the public transparency. Because it's part of the general plan, it's also part of the local coastal plan. Both general plan law and the Coastal Act require that this has to be approved by noticed public hearings, notice 10 days ahead, and public hearings. You stated in your Brown Act response to the Morro Bay Action Team that the City Council understands and supports the importance of transparent and open government, but you proceed to take action to approve an amendment of the general plan and local coastal plan, first as a business item and now to propose to approve it as a consent item. By doing this, you eliminate the statutory processes, the notice and public hearings by which public transparency is provided. If you proceed to approve this general plan, local coastal plan amendment without a public hearing, you will have illegally evaded and prevented the transparency that everyone here is asking for tonight. This requires not only hearings, but it's going to require an environmental impact report. We've heard over and over that people are very worried about the scenic impacts that this would have. We have to have an environmental impact report on this, and we have to have hearings with a 10-day notice as required by law. We ask you to provide the transparency that you support and direct staff to bring this general plan amendment and local coastal plan amendment back by notice public hearings as required by law. If staff members or council of the city advise that approval of the downtown waterfront strategic plan does not require a notice public hearing and environmental review, please ask them to provide the legal support for the opinion. And I've made a copy of the sections of the general plan that I got this from. So, of the government code.
Thank you. David Nelson. Thank you, Cynthia.
Hi, David Nelson, Morro Bay. My neighbor is trying to put in a granny unit, and he's having a really hard time with our building. Now, you're sitting up, and while he did this granny unit, I had to be noticed that he was going to do this, just like my other neighbors. Has there been a notice to all those streets around this area that you're planning on building 3-story plus 7 feet? I think people need to be aware of this. I picked up the report today, the harbor plan, and you read the first couple of chapters. Each one of them, right in the top, says we want to keep our small town, enhance our viability as a city. Well, this doesn't do that. This really screws our town up. Important view sheds, if you start putting up models, you're going to see how ugly this is. Look what's going on down in San Luis. You're never going to see the sun in San Luis anymore. As it is on one side of the street, you never wear your sunglasses because everything's shadowed out. And this is what we're asking for. This plan should be, one speaker said that the workshops were well attended, but the numbers I saw was 30 or 35 people. There's more than that in this room right now, and I don't see this as a well-attended meeting. So, people need to know about this, and I think a workshop is in line now that they have all these things done. This 37 feet was buried in chapter 3, seemingly out of nowhere. Now, I wasn't at the workshops. I had an operation, and I wasn't able to attend those meetings, but what I've read so far, I'm not really impressed with, and I think that you need the public input of people that care, and I think that all those people around this business and waterfront district should be notified of at least this one plan, and I'm sure there's other things in there, but generally I go along with the idea of we should know what we're doing. But I live in the Del Mar tract, and council after council have destroyed all our economical viability down there from businesses moving in, because instead of businesses, we're building houses that don't have enough parking because they're built on lots that weren't meant to be houses. And this just goes on. And this is the way cities work, I guess, but this is the way we deteriorate our cities. And this is just a gross thing to do to our city. And 2 stories with a business in it, I have no problem with mixed use, none. But I do have a problem with a 3rd story in the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jeff Heller and then Walter Heath.
Jeff Heller. I think the language regarding the 37-foot height plus another 7 feet should be stricken from this document, and I'd like to ask the council to make a motion to that effect tonight. And let me tell you why. I was a member of the GPAC for about 1.5 years, 2 years. I worked on this document with 8 or 9 other people. It was a great experience. We talked about many, many things, and I'm very proud of the document that came out, and I feel like it really represents what the people of this city want, which is preserving the neighborhood small town feeling. I must say, though, I was disappointed near one of the latter meetings that I attended I showed up at the meeting and we looked at the document, or we were going to talk about the document, and I was told that it had already been moved up to the Planning Commission for their review. At no point were we asked to formally approve the document, speak up about anything that we really strongly objected to. I must admit, we did talk about a 3-story buildings downtown because it'd be more economically feasible and generate more income, which we nodded and we listened to. However, I can categorically say no member of the GPAC supported 3-story buildings downtown. It destroys the character. We had other ideas on how people can make money with those buildings, but 3 stories was not one of them. And for that reason alone, this should be stricken. This was an idea that was proposed by staff and the consultants with no support from the members of the committee. Did we talk about it? Yes. Did it get support? Absolutely no. Thank you.
Thank you. Walter. Thank you, everybody, please. Walter Heath, and then Debbie Heifel.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. I'm Walter Heath, the resident of Morro Bay. I just want to say that I really don't have much to add in terms of what the other speakers have said, but there are a couple of things here that I think maybe are warrant some clarification. First, the downtown waterfront strategic plan would be more like, for a prospective developer, more like a prospectus, part of the overall research that someone would do to kind of get a sense of what the community is like and what the community might be looking for. It's a long way from sitting down and determining what's economically feasible, where, return on investment for a project, and coming up with a specific suggestion. So there's probably, I don't know, that the sense of urgency that I'm hearing in the room is not warranted. You're talking about something that's far down the road and would have to go through its own process before it would even get close to being approved. So I just want to allay, I think, some of the concerns that I'm hearing expressed here tonight, that somehow, having this prospectus document is going to cause a rush of people to come in downtown when we have businesses, failing and hanging by a thread. I just don't see a bunch of developers, suddenly wanting to kind of rush in here and starting to develop the place. It's so I just want to say that. Secondly, with respect to kind of coming late to the party, to the process here, I just would suggest to folks there is the facility on the city website to be notified of agendas for every meeting that occurs in this city. So I would encourage people, if they want to know, if they want to be part of the process, instead of just constantly throwing up roadblocks at the last minute, that folks sign up to receive those agendas so they can be part of the process, and we can hear those concerns, up front. I think sometimes the public perception of Morro Bay suffers when we do these things in kind of a last-minute, urgent, just obstructionist manner. Let's be part of the discussion and hear what our other neighbors have, and instead of kind of rushing in with our privilege and saying, oh, we just want to throw a roadblock in front of this and be preservationist because we can. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is the last speaker slip I have, Debbie Heifel.
Good evening, Debbie Heifel, Morro Bay. I arrived late because I teach an adult ed class at the high school, and I was just notified this morning by a friend that this was happening, and so I had my class end early so I could come over, even though I'm exhausted and haven't had dinner, but that's how important this is to me. I would ask that you do not vote tonight. This doesn't belong on the consent calendar. I think that's been reiterated. I think what Cynthia Hawley mentioned, who knows the law and has looked at the general plan procedures, I think the legalities are a problem on this. I was, leaving my classroom at 20 after 7, walking in, I thought, wow, for such a last-minute thing that I didn't hear about until today, to have this amount of people that are still talking. If this is ignored, I think your consciences, if it were me, would have a hard time, justifying it. We need to do this better. Please do not vote tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else here for this item? Otherwise, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to council. I don't know to what extent we want to. Did you wish to? Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, Council.
Bring the mic down a little bit so we can hear you.
Mayor Pro Tem and Council, my name is Genevieve Holloway. I'm a resident of Morro Bay. I was notified this morning about this meeting, and I think the importance of watershed views cannot be understated. As somebody said, once you put up a 44-foot building, you can't take it down, and then everyone wants a 44-foot building. I don't want to see a mural of the rock on the back of a building, as San Luis has done, so that we know what our rock looks like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to now close public comment, seeing no further comment, and bring it back to would you like to start discussion down there, since you're at that end, and tell me, I know that we have some issues that were raised that we may need to clarify, and I think you've been keeping track. At least we need to keep track of when the next meeting is going to be that's going to deal with this issue, because obviously there's a lot of concern about it, and that meeting is actually more important than this one because it's a policy decision, not a guideline. So, Scott, do you want to reiterate that, and do you want to explain the notice requirements for the meeting on that? It's a planning commission, right?
Yeah, so we will be discussing the development standards for the zoning code update at our... We will be discussing the zoning code update, the development standards portion of the zoning code update at our next planning commission meeting, which is February 6th. Part of that includes height in the downtown area, and we'll identify the areas in that downtown sort of orangish red area that's shown there, where properties can go would be able to go to 37 feet, and that's identified by zone. This map doesn't show you any zoning; it just shows you the outline of the downtown area for the purposes of this plan. I would also note that the plan is not part of the general plan, is not part of the LCP. Those are separate processes that we're going through. This is not like a specific plan where you would be going through that type process that Ms. Hawley discussed. This is pretty much right in line with the economic development strategic plan that we went through, which kind of gives us things to go do later on down the road to implement policy, our concept ideas for improvement of our downtown, connection of our downtown and waterfront, those types of things. And there's design guidelines in here and things like that. The one thing that touched on actual policy was the 37-foot item, and that's being put into the update process for consideration. So I would definitely encourage folks, since there were a lot of opinions and a lot of people were concerned about it, that definitely come out to our planning commission meeting on Tuesday, February 6th, so we can have a good discussion on that. I think it's valuable.
Yeah, and could you also clarify the difference in the height, what the current code states and what is being proposed in these guidelines, which, again, I want to emphasize are guidelines.
In general, our current height limit in the commercial areas of our downtown is 30 feet, again, in general. But you can exceed that, with a minor use permit, and there doesn't seem to be a cap on that. I am assuming the exceedance would be for architectural appurtenances, although it's a little unclear in the code. This policy sets it at 37 feet and then caps the appurtenances at an additional 7, which is where the 44 comes from. And so the math they're doing is correct. It's just not the building itself, with interior space wouldn't be that tall.
Okay. And were there any other issues that need to be clarified?
Oh, what's the noticing requirement for the Planning Commission meeting? Is it 10 days?
It will be when we bring back final policy language. This is more of a business item right now because we're getting input from the Planning Commission, just like we did with the GPAC on this item. Eventually, it'll be coming back through a process where we'll go through that noticing process because it'll be for an ordinance and a recommendation from Planning Commission to City Council for final adoption.
I am inclined to strike this sentence about height from the plan and just not mention it. What effect will that have on going forward?
It won't have any effect, assuming three of you need to agree. But if you do, you could strike it from the document. We would continue down through the zoning code update process and vet it through that. It's appropriate. It's an appropriate process to take. And given the concern that was voiced this evening, I'm fine with that. I don't have any issue with that. We're going to continue to vet it. At least we don't have documents that say two different things. That would be probably a decent resolution.
So that would be how I would like to go forward.
Okay. And Matt?
Yes, Scott, I'd like to discuss how was this item in terms of timing? It seems some folks figure it was just put on consent automatically. Could you explain the timeline of how this got to consent and what was done along the way?
Well, it was on consent because we've gone through the process, had several meetings, both at the General Plan Advisory Committee level, at the Planning Commission level, and with City Council in preparing the document and completing it. So at all those opportunities and all those stopping points, we received input, revised the document, and brought it forward. And when we were done with it, we brought it forward to City Council for adoption at the meeting, September. And again, Council voted to adopt 2/3 of it and not the downtown portion of it because some changes were desired.
Okay, so in terms of the quote-unquote transparency concept, there were, I think you said 6 or 8 various times that this was brought up and discussed at various either committees and or council meetings or planning commissions?
So we prepared a draft of the document in February of last year. That draft included the 37-foot height limit, and we had, I think, 7 or 8 meetings since then, including GPAC, Planning Commission, and City Council.
Okay. Mr. Heller had an interesting comment, and that was that he hadn't seen this. Was this ever discussed? Can you recall at any other meeting? It
was discussed at GPAC meetings. The General Plan Advisory Committee is just that. They're not a recommending body. So we used them, to condense information and filter information through, and then would move it from that level to the Planning Commission to get recommendation sort of type level policy to move forward. But it was discussed at then, and it was again in the context of economic development and having the ability to put residential units above commercial spaces in the downtown. That was where this came from. And when you started doing the math, we realized we had issues getting there with a 30-foot, and so came up with a 37-foot idea where you could fit it in there. It could be less. Certainly, we go down that road. I mean, it just depends. I mean,
so in terms of this document informing as an economic development plan, informing GP, LCP, and or any sort of item that would come in front of the Planning Commission, i.e. some sort of edifice or building that would exceed up to that level, that would have to go through strict scrutiny, correct?
Well, nothing would be.
Or would this document inform it, and people would automatically say, "Oh, wow, there's this document that informs it. We have to accept it."
Unless we push the change in height limit into our zoning code, there would be no structures that come forward in this area that are that high. At least they wouldn't be approved because it wouldn't be consistent with the zoning code.
Got it. And each one in that case would have to be discussed ad infinitum and say, "Hey, they would need variances. They would need whatever."
That would be the only way that they'd be able to request one currently with the current code. It would have to be through some sort of variance process.
Got it. Mr. Odell brought up a really good point in terms of his work back in the 80s on downtown development. And in terms of that, in terms of him talking about groups of people getting together, is this essentially what this group has done? And then how would a group want to bring in some of his suggestions in terms of the, structuring various buildings? And is that coming through the downtown waterfront plan? Does that go through any sort of architectural group that hasn't been created yet?
Certainly, they could have done it through that process. We're sort of at the last stages of that now.
Got it.
And so it would be then through the general plan and LCP and zoning code update process where you'd be engaging now moving forward, as we have discussions related to that 37-foot height limit.
Okay. So we're
obviously significant concern. So we're going to have a good conversation with the Planning Commission about that, and I think they'll be interested to have that because.
So we would be pretty late in the game to introduce anything like that into the mix right now. And so in terms of, I think in terms of all of this, the consternation of the public, the one item seems to be this height distinction. And so I would, in that case, agree with Red. But then I also go back to Marlis, when this came to council last, have all of your concerns been met?
Yeah, and mine were more editorial and more just some general comments on that I thought would help improve the plan. And yes, I've seen it, and I agree with my fellow council members that we should strike the language and adopt the remainder of the plan, since we've already adopted the the waterfront portion of the plan. We should move adoption of this without the height limit.
Okay, so that policy is on page 3.6 of the plan,
okay,
or page 71 of the packet, and it's policy 3.2 to A1. It's under buildings.
A1A.
A1A, yeah.
So can we get a motion?
I move to adopt the downtown portion of the DWSP and strike the sentence in Chapter 3, 3.2.2A1A, which deletes downtown up to 37 feet architectural projections such as towers and turrets may extend an additional 7 feet above the maximum building height.
I second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 3-0. Sorry about that.
Can we take a recess?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a short recess.
I like that. Share a little bit of it. It's all my fault.